let's switch some gears and let's talk about accessibility. Ability to use services in our everyday lives. And there are people who not necessarily have an ability to do that. Almost 1 in 5 Europeans, including many older people and people who have a temporary impairment, suffer from a disability that hinders them from using different services, including digital ones. This puts a lot of people at disadvantage. But technology is the one which can enable those people use different kind of services and also participate in everyday life. And European Accessibility Act is also coming in place in 2025. So these are the topics for the next panel, moderated by Will Townsend. And the name is Accessibility as a Responsibility and Opportunity for the Technology Sector. And we also have an interaction possible over here with interactive poll where you can answer the question. Are you aware of the contents of the European Accessibility Act, which is set to be placed by 2025? It's like you just listen very carefully and probably you will have answer yes to that question. And also you can ask questions over there. There's going to be an opportunity for questions. So, with further ado,
all right.
Will, over to you.
Thank you, Ernest. I appreciate that. Welcome everyone out there online and here today at 5G Techritory. I'm Will Townsend. I'm the Vice President and Principal Analyst for Networking and Security at More Insights and Strategy. We're a firm based in the United States. And this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. I actually have a nephew and a godson that have disabilities. And we often focus on the digital divide, connecting the unconnected. And that's a global phenomenon. It's actually the subject of a book that I'm currently writing called The Human Network. But we're going to talk today about digital accessibility. And with that, before we get started, I'd like to introduce our panelists. I'm an American. I don't want to butcher their names. So we have Michalis from Microsoft joining online. Michalis, are you out there?
Yes, and I'm really missing being physically there with you, team. But thankfully, that due to technology, where I can listen, I can hear, and definitely I can interact with you. So I'm Michalis Moskos. I'm part of the Microsoft Central Eastern Europe team. I'm responsible for global partner solutions. And as part of my role, I'm also leading the accessibility community in Central Eastern Europe for Microsoft. Happy to be here and discussing this topic, which is so dear to my heart.
Thank you, thank you. Kaspers, let's go to you.
So my name is Kaspers, and I am Business Development Director at Tilde. Tilde is a language technology company, and I do consider myself a language technology or AI-enabled language technology evangelist. And as of my past, I've spent more than 25 years in HR, and accessibility, of course, a human side of accessibility was part of my responsibilities over that time. So very, very important topic in my life.
Welcome, welcome. Pauls?
Hello, I'm Pauls Putitis. I'm representing here the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Regional Development of Republic of Latvia, and the Ministry monitors the accessibility of the websites of the state institutions and provides methodological support. That's what we do.
Welcome, and last but not least, Alina. Welcome.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Elena from the Ministry of Welfare, in other words, Ministry of Social Affairs. This is the ministry responsible for disability policy in Latvia, and we are also the governmental coordination body for the UN Convention implementation in Latvia. And recently we have been the ones coordinating the new law for the transposition of the directive.
Welcome. Well, let's jump right into it. So I think to kind of level set, it's important to define what we mean by digital accessibility. And Michalis, I know that Microsoft recently filmed a video or put a video together that sort of addresses this, and we'd like to play that to start the conversation.
Technology can make things easier, but it can also make things possible. More than 1 billion people have a disability around the world. And while some disabilities are visibly apparent, others are not. Today, many report experiencing mental health conditions for the first time. The truth is, most of us will experience disability at some point in our lives, temporarily or permanently. Still, people with disabilities face higher unemployment rates, more than twice that of people without. And only 1 in 10 have access to the assistive devices they need to be active in their communities. The COVID-19 pandemic has only exacerbated this disability divide, with many experiencing symptoms that are lasting for weeks or months after diagnosis.
That's really compelling. I mean, I think that does a really great job of really sort of setting the context for the disability divide. And Michaelis, I'd like to start with you, and then we'll move to the other panelists. But I'd like to hear from your perspective how you define digital accessibility, and what are some of the key challenges that you're trying to solve at Microsoft?
Super. Thank you very much, Will. Look, digital accessibility, if I want to put it in one word, is the way that digital technologies and products are designed and developed to be accessible to all users. As simple as that, I would say. Now, we need to empower people to live a fuller life, to be included as equal members of the community. And on that front, I would say I would see two main challenges. The first one is to drive awareness on accessibility, what it is, but also the responsibility we have, and equally the opportunity that it carries. When I heard for the first time that 20% of people are experiencing accessibility challenges, I could not believe. We're not aware on the number, we're not aware that not all disabilities are visible, and we tend to forget that unfortunately, at some point in our lives, we also experience one type or more of disabilities. Now, the second challenge is to drive inclusion by design. Now, if you don't do that, you exclude people at products or services that you design. When you design a product without having in mind how a person with dyslexia, for example, consumes content, then you exclude that community. So exclusion is a hard reality to accept in our modern society, I would say. And we do not assume. We should stop assuming. We should include by design, I would say. These are the two probably challenges that we say are fourth and foremost important to address at the first stage.
Yeah, you know, and I remember when we were all preparing for this panel, you touched on the point that accessibility, I mean, disability can be both temporary and longer term or permanent, right? So I think the way that we have to approach this is sort of keeping both of those in mind. But Kaspers, would love to get your perspective here.
Yeah, I will narrow it down because I represent language technology. So in our context, accessibility deals with people accessing information, knowledge, and services in the digital realm. So that's what we deal. So this in this communication, conversations, communication between people and businesses, between people and government. Between each other, of course, and and we are focusing on availability of those assistive technologies to people representing smaller communities, smaller nations, because to the large extent there is more out there for English speakers. There is more out there for other large communities and smaller communities. People with special needs in small communities deserve same access to technology, same access to information, knowledge, and services.
So, Alina, I imagine, you know, given your position, you're very close to this. So, what are some of the key challenges that you're seeing in Latvia?
Yes, if we speak about Latvia, we have 200,000 people with disabilities in Latvia, which makes around 10% of the population. But I would like to specify that we speak here not about specific diagnosis or disease. We speak about functioning limitations that are caused by some disease. And this may also affect any other person with no administrative disability status. But one of the challenges, of course, is the possibility to use the new things, services, apply for services, receive answers, to be independent and lead their lives as they want to, not being forced to rely on some specific small doors behind the building, on some specific page where they might find information, to be able to operate on the same terms as everyone. And I would say, yes, the main question is not anymore why do we need this and what do we need, but how to do it. This is the main challenge currently.
Sure. And Paul's, anything to add there?
There's, I think, Elena said, I wanted to add, when we are going and see the material world, and we see the people with disabilities, they want to do the same we are doing, and that's the same in the digital world. They want to do the same we can do there.
So, for me, the big question is, what's the responsibility that needs to be taken by, governmental bodies, municipalities, and industry players that can make a huge impact like Microsoft? Is it a public-private partnership? The answer, I think, is probably yes. But Alina, I'd love for you to weigh in on this.
Yes, our task is, of course, to create the legal regulation, the framework where do we operate, what are the requirements, what do we procure as services or goods when we do procure something, so that business sector knows in advance what will be requested in next coming years. And here, of course, the Accessibility Act has made huge changes. It was adopted in 2019, and those last years have been very difficult and challenging also for member states themselves, because the Accessibility Act actually is very different from other directives where you might read very specific requirements. Here in the Accessibility Act you mostly read the end goals, the functionality that needs to be achieved. It does not prescribe
how you get
the
there,
recipe.
right?
Yeah, how do you land there?
Yeah.
And this is the challenge to answer the question how. So currently the governments are, all of them, doing the legal framework establishment process. Some of them are already further down the road and some of them not very far, but until 25 we need to be in the place where the legal acts are fully in place and business sector is ready to use them, to implement them, to apply them in their everyday life.
Pauls, are you part of that recipe to get to that end goal?
My job is to work with public sector, public bodies, how these websites and mobile applications, which must be accessible. So what we can do, we will be happy to make workshops and trainings together with business partners for private sector also, and also for end users. A lot of people don't know actually what they can gain if the website is accessible. They don't have this experience at all.
Sure.
So if they would know this, the business possibilities would be much more bigger than.
Sure. Michalis, would love for you to weigh in on this as well. What's your perspective here?
Look, first of all, I'm very honest. We haven't met with the panelists before, but I was so moved to listen to Alina describing about the European Accessibility Act and what is our responsibility on that front, because I think that both government and private sector needs to hold hands together. This is something that we need to advance how the community will operate in the future. For us, it's a monumental change and an opportunity that we have to include everyone in the play. So what we're doing on our front, we're checking against those requirements to ensure our products are fully compliant. And in many cases, we try to push further the envelope on accessibility, as we have started years back on our own journey as a company, as Microsoft. Now, also, what also was mentioned before, we participate in the discussion. Again, the Accessibility Act shows what you need to deliver, but not how to do it. So we need to hold hands together with local governmental bodies, with associations, in order to land this directive and transposition, of course, to the final products. We see this as an opportunity to step change the future of accessibility. And we also believe as a company that what happens today in Europe will continue to more countries. So what we do is we also share internally in the company the experience with our peers, and when we do changes in the products, we advance those changes worldwide.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. Caspers, anything to add as we kind of close this discussion?
I will. If I'm thinking about the role of the government or the role of the public institutions to take care of accessibility, I think it's like at least threefold. Number one is regulatory environment, including also instruments to support business side in developing those tools and technologies, because it takes it's actually quite costly, and no, since the community itself cannot compensate for that. I mean, people with different needs, so we need to somehow find or join forces in that regard as well. Second role I see is government should lead by example. Yeah. I truly believe that when we talk about accessibility, we should start with the public sector. We should start with government institutions, making sure and demonstrating how this should work in real life. And last but not least is this partnering with businesses and partnering with NGOs, the organizations representing those people, those groups of people with special needs, to have a common understanding, having a common understanding of issues related to that, and then jointly finding solutions.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad to hear that my esteemed colleagues agree with me that it's definitely a public-private partnership. Let's move to sort of, at the end of the day, proof is in the execution, right? And I'd love to hear from each of you some specific examples of what you're doing to address digital accessibility. So Caspers, let's start with you there.
Yeah, I will bring just a few examples. So let me start. So we represent natural language processing technologies, machine translation, speech recognition, voice synthesis, and natural language understanding. So basically the intelligent, it's part of conversational AI, intelligent systems, chatbots, voice bots, and so. What we have done, we have developed together with partners, we have developed solutions for people with visibility impairments and people with dyslexia. So those kind of desktop readers, book readers. We have there is a system called Bruno Master that is provides for reading actually printed books. It reads it out loud, page by page. There is equipment associated to that as well. Second area is related to speech recognition. So people with hearing impairments. So we have provided technologies for real-time captioning, for subtitling of audio and video content. This is, and last but not least, our chatbots are also helping people who cannot, with physical disabilities, also with speaking problems, they can communicate with government institutions, with businesses, so they can receive the support. So we have a lot of solutions, but those are just few to be mentioned.
Yeah, well, that's quite a bit, and facilitating that communication is mission critical to sort of complete the perspective from the private sector. I know, Michalis, Microsoft's doing some incredible things here. I know the company's been focused on accessibility for many, many, many years, but can you cite some recent examples of things that the company's been working on?
Yeah, I will say, to be honest, I will try to address the accessibility journey because I think, everyone knows the features, the many features that we have in our products and services. Looking at Teams, looking at Microsoft 365, You have more than 100 and 150 accessibility features. I can take the Windows 11 example with tons of accessibility features that we update continuously. But I think the essence for us is how to strengthen the ecosystem. So for us, number one priority is to raise awareness about the issue at scale, and we do start with ourselves. I think you see the badge that I have on the back of myself. So we are having a training that is mandatory for all employees when they join Microsoft to have an accessibility training. This is one of the mandatory things that we ask everyone to take. And also we continue the learning with a badge on accessibility, so complementary learning. And we compete with each other. We compete between the regions, the countries, on what is the accessibility achievement that we had with our employees, because we want really to drive awareness about the issue, and we want to drive awareness of what it is and how to solve it. Now, the second one is we try to ensure that internal and external engagements are accessible, meetings, events, websites, and definitely support our partners on how to drive similarly accessible events and websites and services, I would say. We also have suppliers. We have prerequisites with our suppliers on having an accessibility agenda and having accessible features in their services that they deliver to Microsoft. And of course, I think the important for us is to design products with accessibility in mind from the start. So following inclusive design principles. So we have a disabled community being part of our product development teams. We have testers on that front. So we are actually designing within the community, with the community, I would say. And the last one is what has been mentioned before, help our customers to progress their accessibility journey, having executive briefings, hackathons together on accessibility to try to solve real life problems that we see happening in the communities. We educate them, but at the same time, we learn from them, from their questions, from their challenges that they face. So these are a few areas, not about the features per se, which is actually the outcome of all those actions that we take as a company.
Right. Before I became an analyst, I spent 30 years in corporate America and worked for companies like Dell and Compaq Computer. And it was always mission critical to get that customer feedback and input to refine the product, whether it was a consumer PC or a commercial, desktop or notebook computer. And what impresses me about Microsoft is you focus on that. You're actually collecting that input from people with disabilities and using that to build viable products and to build out your roadmap. So completely impressive, and please continue that work. It's very important. But let's get the sort of the citizen service perspective. Alina, let's start with you. Specifically in Latvia, can you provide some examples of what you're doing?
I would divide this in two parts. Besides the directive and the law itself, what we do as a ministry, as a policymaker, and as an administrative body. Of course, if we want to prescribe some mandatory procedures for the private sector, we have to comply with them ourselves. So this goes both to the web page, meetings and events. We have a checklist when we organize events, what should be ensured, and this includes not only physical accessibility, but also hearing loops, subtitles, deaf language interpreter, and etc. And meetings by now, we have also cooperated with Tilde, providing the subtitles or the separate screen with the speech-to-text possibility, which actually was not very easy because the auditory usually requests something like a velotypist service that is available in other European languages. In Latvian language, it was not recently very common here as a small language here. But besides that, we have also a national program for assistive technologies, devices provided for people with disabilities, and this includes not only functional beds and physical disability goods, but also technologies, programs, communication devices, applications and pictograms, typhlotechnics and such things. They are not very broadly requested, I must admit. Mostly probably because the skills of the target group are not up to that level,
Right.
which means that this is also a domain where we should invest our efforts to to make them capable of using what we provide to them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that digital literacy,
Yeah.
and there's a huge gap when you just look broadly at the digital divide and parts of the world that are unconnected. Like in my home country, there are efforts to bring connectivity into these underserved communities. A lot of them are socioeconomically disadvantaged. But then what happens when you provide that connectivity? How do people know how to use or even have access to devices?
If I may add, I think the subject of developing digital skills in society is very, very topical here in Latvia, but not only. But I think we tend to forget that we have to be inclusive, also thinking about digital skills development. So we have to also introduce methods, tools, and ways of people with special needs can learn those new things, those new technologies, and using, so those, to improve their digital skills.
Absolutely, it's mission critical. Pauls, I don't want to leave you out of this topic before we move on, but what are some examples that you and your ministry is focused on?
Yeah, thank you, Kaspar. So you told about speech recognition and chatbots. This is made actually together with the public sector, and I wanted to mention that there is a build unified web platform for public institutions, and this is a tool that allows to create websites for institutions, and this unified web platform has accessibility features by design. So there is easier for institutions to meet accessibility requirements, and I wanted to add that this is very important that we communicate with NGOs, and we want to be a part of this community, make this stable community of the people who is aware of accessibility.
And Alina, you touched on the European Accessibility Act, right? And I understand that by 2025 it will be fully put in place. Can you kind of just speak to that very broadly, and then touch on what you're doing within your organization to ensure compliance? And then I'd like to ask the same of the other panelists as well.
Oh yeah, since 2019 the Accessibility Act is in force, and it covers both goods and services, and the spheres covered by the directive is quite large actually. Computers, self-service terminals, e-books, e-readers, banking services, e-commerce, emergency phone calls like 112, public procurement procedures as well, air, bus, rail and waterway passenger transportation services, consumer terminals and electronic communication services like routers and modems, and also consumer terminals for audiovisual media services. And audiovisual media services in it was mentioned already, subtitles, audio descriptions, hybrid television, websites and so on. Which means that the responsibility is broadly scattered among different line ministries. There was no one single ministry who could take care of all of sectors covered by the directive. So in Latvia, we finally designed a separate law. We did not make amendments to existing laws. but drafted a new law on goods and services accessibility. And additionally, we did amendments to some laws, which was not possible to implement into this new law. The law is currently submitted to the Parliament. Since we have a rather new government, it's adopted in the first reading by the previous Parliament, and now we are expecting the second reading and further discussions in the Parliament soon. So the law needs to be in place as soon as possible to be sure that the business sector is aware what is requested and prescribed in our laws. The law prescribes also the claiming procedures, what happens if you don't comply, who is responsible for that. The individual should know how and where they may submit their claims, and the business sector needs to know how those situations are dealt with. And I can already say that there are no fines for that. Usually it will be solved by communication and consultation procedures, and a request to do some additional to make the things available. Sure. If it was not before, so you need to do the required applications and devices so that person can use them. Finally, if it's not done, then there might follow some administrative acts which request it as a mandatory procedure to comply the not complied previously thing by the date X.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, it is quite extensive, and it's going to take time to implement, obviously. From my perspective and scenarios that I've been involved in, similar scenarios, it's almost, it's maybe a better approach to provide incentives for people to accelerate compliance versus the carrot versus the stick, I guess is where I'm going with that. But Paul, is anything to add?
I don't know. If it concerns the websites which I'm working to, I wanted to add that we have prepared guidelines for website accessibility monitoring, and we can share these guidelines with private sector as well, as much as concerned to me. But according to European Accessibility Act, I wanted to add that as far as we are speaking about websites and mobile applications, there is another directive which applies to public sector, and this directive will be actually as well. It should be used for private sector as far as concerns these passenger transport services and so on, because these companies, for example, Airbus and rail or waterborne companies, their websites and mobile applications must be accessible according to these guidelines, which we are calling WCAG guidelines. And so, yeah, these two European acts goes together.
Yeah, it's quite a complicated scenario to solve. Kaspers, you know, what is Tilde doing, you know, with respect to moving towards that compliance for EAA?
Well, the main thing, because we are doing a lot of things, but one thing I want to mention that we are doing for all Baltic markets is we are preparing for June 28th of 2025. which will be the date starting from which all electronic media has to provide subtitling, real-life subtitling for all its content that is broadcasted. So, which means, and real-time subtitling is quite a challenging task. That's we make a difference between captioning, which is what Elina was referring to, which is like you get the full text transcripts, and subtitling means that those texts are divided by sentences, segmented, they are adjusted to the screen, to the video, and so on and so forth. So it's quite a challenging task, again, for complex languages like Latvian, Estonian, Lithuanian, Polish, Finnish that we work with. So we are preparing for that.
Yeah. Michalis, can you provide some examples of what Microsoft is doing to move towards compliance?
Well, first of all, we start with our own, let's say, tools that we are using. I would say that we had and I like Paul mentioned about the accessible websites. 3 years ago, we started a journey in order to make all of our websites worldwide accessible, and everyone was green, was happy.
Did we lose Michalis?
Froze.
Red. Why? Because we had the website guidelines being much more harder to fill. So I would say accessibility is not a 0 or 1. Accessibility, it's a continuum. And we are making the accessibility standards harder to meet internally, and definitely provide accessibility features in our products much more than in the past. So I would say we churn probably features every month on our products, and this is something that is really a big work for our engineering teams, I would say. Sure. The second one, I would say, looking for the future. By the way, do you hear me well, guys?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. So the second one, which I think is more forward-looking, is how we can amp the game through our ecosystem. Microsoft is providing technology and solutions for our customers to develop, but we rely a lot on a big network of partners. And I think this is what we need to do probably in the future, to collect all those accessibility features that the partners are building based on Microsoft technology, and help this to amplify the game, I would say. For us, might be an opportunity in the future, and this is something that we need to work on towards landing the European Accessibility Act. So not only about our technology, but also what we do together with our ecosystem.
Sure. No, I totally agree. And so as we wrap up the conversation, I would be remiss if I didn't bring 5G into the conversation. I write on Forbes, and I write quite a bit about 5G and the use cases. And really, 5G brings a lot of what I call superpowers. And at some point, I'm going to record a video about the 5G superpowers. But when you look at the ultra-low latency, when you look at the throughput, when you look at the massive device support, I'm just wondering, and Michalis, I'd like to start with you. Where do you think 5G can really sort of take digital accessibility for the disabled, both people with temporary disablements and permanent disablements, to the next level?
Yeah, I think we need to see it in the broader context of living, I would say. Technology, since a few decades now, is not a privilege of the few. It's not used for specific, well-defined purposes. It is used everywhere, at work and at home. It encapsulates the way we live and helps us to live a fullest, more meaningful life. Now, I think vision, the vision can be a lot of things. People can use it in many areas. An example, wayfinding for people with disabilities, moving and navigating more independently in an area where 5G is going to benefit them. For example, people who are blind, they are now using a white cane or services animal, but imagine 5G connected smart glasses paired with a smartphone, which can give them a power of the artificial intelligence and give a person real-time audio feedback to help navigate in a store or in the city. So I think we will see in the future a lot of applications based on 5G and artificial intelligence, and how that helps people with disabilities, not only in their work, but also in personal life as well.
Yeah, you talked about wayfinding, so that becomes a massive IoT, narrowband IoT, 5G supports, just a quantum level more devices than LTE, and then sort of, the vision, sort of use case you were speaking to that requires ultra low latency. Standalone 5G mobile networks will deliver it. Casper's, the same question for you.
Yeah, a very quick answer since we are running out of time. I believe in our case, it's all about connectivity between devices that people are using as assistive technology, and speed of exchange of data. So we can provide all the technologies almost in real time. So that's very, very important that we can move large chunks of data around very quickly, so those technologies can really work to their full extent when used on those devices. Yeah. That's probably our perspective.
Sure. And Alina and Pauls, I don't want to put you on the spot because you're not necessarily technologists, although you might be. But I know that you work very closely with the carriers here in Latvia, LMT and others. I mean, do you see 5G unlocking anything special?
Yes, I would like to underline that one sector where we see it might have a good impact is long-term care and home care services, where we all face lack of workers, but there are certain things where you can replace the carer as a person and use technology instead. There is assisted living and smart homes element that is not very broadly used currently in Latvia, and we will have a structural funds supported measure in coming years where we very much expect the private sector cooperate with the social service providers to create such innovative solutions in the long-term care and the home care sector.
I love it. Well, that concludes the panel discussion. I want to thank my esteemed colleagues for a very insightful discussion. I loved how we got both the public and the private perspectives on this. Ernest, I'm going to hand it over to you. I think we've got a poll question and we may have some Q&A, right?
Yeah, we had a poll question, and it was about awareness of the contents of European Accessibility Act. Drum roll, the 67% are aware.
Okay,
What's
good.
the contents, but still 33 are not quite there yet.
Okay, we got to work on that.
There's work to be done. And well, do we have questions from audience?
Any questions? Did we do that great of a job? I believe we did.
Yeah, there's no online questions also. So.
All right. Well, thank you again.
You can actually, maybe you can have one or two
since we have
questions.
Some
time.
Yeah. So maybe some final thoughts. So Michalis, any final thoughts as we wrap things up?
I would say that first and foremost, I think we need to address this together. I would say for me, being part of a technology conference, the topic of accessibility, I think this is what I would love to see more and more. It's not Microsoft. All the firepower that Microsoft and every other company can put together, it will never be able to solve this challenge or opportunity. I think working with governments, working with our partners ecosystem, even the competition, we need to work together on that in order to solve and make a disability divide something that we will look at the past and we say, okay, we went along the way, a very long way, but we managed to close the gap. I think it takes an army for that, and looking forward to partner with other communities around closing the disability divide.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think, with companies like Tilde and Microsoft, the more companies that are focused on this issue, the more innovation that's going to come up. And as, companies like Microsoft and Tilde lean into 5G as those networks get deployed, I think we're going to see just continued innovation. I mean, competition breeds innovation in the private sector, and I think it can do that for digital accessibility for the disabled as well.
I love what Michalis was saying, because just as we speak, we are actually discussing with Microsoft and joining forces in one very interesting idea that we came up with, which is to introduce speech recognition as a technology for kids at school, for school pupils, so that the kids who have hearing impairments can actually follow what's going on in the class by very simple means. Actually, the teacher having a microphone on and the kids having either a screen and a monitor in front of them, or interactive board in front of them, or actually they can also follow it on their mobile devices if allowed in a class. So, and we are currently working on finding a pilot school. We have a discussion tomorrow, by the way, with your colleagues, Michaelis. If we will find and when we will find the pilot school and we will do the pilot, I hope the results will be impressive. So we will take this and go to the government, or not present here, to the Ministry of Education and Science, introducing this idea not only in Latvia but also across Central Eastern Europe. So that's our new project, new initiative, and I'm happy to be partnering with Microsoft in that.
That's exciting. I'm hoping at the next 5G Techritory we can hear the result of that proof of concept. But Paul, any final thoughts as we close the panel?
I like very much what Michaelis said, and this must be inclusive by design, otherwise it will be exclusive. Yeah. But I want to add that it's very important. How do you develop this content every day? How do you put it in the web? Yeah, you must think about this every day, not just once when you are developing the software.
It's dynamic. It's not static, right? So it has to live and breathe, and yeah. Perfect.
Sure.
Elena, final thoughts?
Yes, thanks a lot. One thing I want to mention is use everywhere where possible the user perspective. Even when drafting the law, we could not rely on our knowledge. This was not the case where we were the main players. So we did cooperate both with the associations from the private sector and also with the NGOs, how to create all this. And I think this applies also to the new solutions that will be created when implementing the new services and goods after 25. And when I was coming here, I looked up the impact assessment Commission made before the Accessibility Act was adopted, and I was looking up specifically what was the experience by the business sector as regards the increase of customers afterwards they introduced some new things that are accessible. And actually 7% of them responded that the number of customers increased by 7%, then 19% said significantly, and 28% stated that slightly increased. So which means that we have more than half of the respondents from the business sector see an increase in number of customers after they make their things more available, which makes a business case, I think.
It does. It's very encouraging that we're on the right track, right? For sure. Well, with that, Ernest, I'm going to hand it back to you.